Come on a journey with a cinephile.
Wake up, sucker. We're thieves and we're bad guys. That's exactly what we are.
We was getting too big for our britches.
What an excellent day for an exorcism.
What have you done to its eyes?
I said, I'm not gonna hurt you. I'm just gonna bash your brains in.
What's your favorite scary movie?
Pretty well, little brother. Pretty well.
Hello and welcome, listeners, to Journey with a Cinephile, a horror movie podcast, where we take a deep dive into the world of horror cinema, from the eerie classics to the latest spine-chilling releases. Join me as I explore the history, themes, and artistry of horror one film at a time. Whether you're a seasoned horror fan or just stepping into the shadows, this journey is for you. So dim the lights, embrace the fear, and let's talk horror. And we're going to be doing this here on episode 274, which is going to be my Women Appreciation number 11. So for my two featured reviews here, I am doing one that I've been trying to find for some years, finally have a chance to see it, and that's going to be Helter, Skelter. This is, I believe, a co-production of like Japan and like Hong Kong maybe, but this one's from 2012. And I went to the Gateway Film Center to check out Presents. So this one actually features families of, we have primarily Asian people, at least in some of the more prominent roles, so I wanted to at least say that there. We also have women in the more important roles in these things as well. So then for mini reviews, I have a couple of screeners here of Around the Decay and Drained, and then I have my voyage through the Fives movie of The Invisible Ray. Now, I've not watched one that's a thriller, not necessarily horror, but I thought it went into, some darker things enough, and that's going to be Kaaterskill Falls. Then I have a documentary here of VHS Massacre, and I'm going to be ending everything out here with a couple of episodes of American Horror Stories, Season 3. But before that, monthly review. Then let's go ahead and do my monthly review here for January 2025. I watched 40 total films, and in comparison here, this is actually one of my lower months that I've done in this one. It's 2023 I did 48, 2022 did 46, and then 41. The lowest I've ever done, though, would have been, I didn't even make my minimum goal here of 2019. I did only 30 of them. So I'm kind of still on the upper end there. I got a lot of them just kind of hovering around this one. But then I watched 33 horror films. This one is actually up there as one of my highest. I'm actually right behind 2022, where I did 35. Last year I did 32, if that kind of says anything there. And then new horror films, I've watched 8. This is the highest I've ever done. The closest I've ever got was 2023. I did 7 of them, usually kind of hovering around between like 4 to 5. So there's that. I've watched 42 horror films that were released in the months of January total, and then I watched 231 horror films in the months of January and 315 total films. So, kind of running a good little gambit there. Then the horror films that I watched here, this one, got some documentaries sprinkled in here. I got Shock Cinema Volume 2, Stoker, Shock Cinema Volume 3, Before I Wake, Lizzie Lazarus, Basket Case, Open Water, The Bride of Frankenstein, Shock Cinema Volume 4, Deadly Blessing, VHS Massacre 2, Baby Oopsie, Basket Case 2, Student Bodies, Bird Eater, Hunting Days, The Raven from 1935, VHS Massacre, New Year's Evil, Boys in the Trees, Older Gods, Stale Popcorn and Sticky Floors, that's another doc, Wolfman 2025, Werewolf Game, The Black Room, The Mothman of Point Pleasant, Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust, Presents, Helter Skelter, Something to Scream About, Round the Decay, Drained, and The Invisible Ray. So then I have 6 countries represented here with the United States, United Kingdom, Australia, Canada, Japan, and Hong Kong. And the 2025 watches I did this month were going to be Lizzie Lazarus, Bird Eater, Hunting Days, Wolfman, Werewolf Game, Presence, Round the Decay, and Drained. Now, the oldest watches are all going to be from 1935, right? The Bride of Frankenstein, The Black Room, The Raven, and Invisible Ray. Average year here is 2000. So this one is actually up on the higher end of this. Highest I've ever did was 2020. I did 2008. And then the lowest I've ever done would have been 1992 was last year. So this one's kind of hovering, like I said. And it looks like the closest other one with 2022, I did 2001. And then I've had another year, 2018, I was in 1999. And then for highest rated, I have, these are all at 8, so it's been a lot of them that I've watched. Nothing was higher than that, though. I had Stoker, The Bride of Frankenstein, The Black Room, Before I Wake, Boys in the Trees, Vampire Hunter, Deep Bloodlust, and there's 2 movies on this episode that are also going to be 8s. So then lowest rated, I have Shock Cinema Volume 3 and 4 and Werewolf Game are all at 5s. Average rating's a 6.8, so 6.8 here is actually the lowest I've ever had. Last year I was at a 7.0, and then the highest I've ever done here would have been in 2021, I was a 7.7. And then average year across the boards here for January's are usually 1999, so I'm trying to bring that up. And I'm actually bringing my average rating down, as 7.2 is normally it's what it's sitting at now. Then percentage of horror here, I'm at 82.5%. This one is actually very in line with last year. I was at 82.05%. And then the lowest I've ever done would have been 2020 as at 63.89%. This one right now, 70, or overall just in general here, I'm at 73.85%. And so how is this year so far stacking up for me is that I'm at 8 new releases for this year. It's on pace here where I should be at 8.3 to get to 100. And then for horror movies, I should be at 30.4. I'm at 33, so, above that. And then I should be, if I want to do 500 movies, should be at 41.7. I'm at 40, so a little bit below there. And then for my total overall of everything, I am bringing that average up. It's at 1999. And then 6.8 right now is bringing my overall average down. It was at 7.3 right now, so there's that. 82.5 for percentage of horror is actually bringing that up. I'm at 80.4 overall across the board here, so we'll see how that kind of shakes out. Then some Letterboxd stats I wanted to share here for this January is going to be that I watched 40 films, 59.1 hours, 44 directors, 6 countries, 3 languages. So the most watched years were going to be 2023. I did 4, 2016, 4, 2024, 4 films. I did 3 in 1935, and then 3 that are actually officially released here this year, not doing festival stuff like that. Horror, of course, is running away with this, followed by thriller, drama, documentary, mystery, adventure, comedy, sci-fi, animation, and action. The most watched countries outside of the United States are Australia, United Kingdom, and Japan. Then the second language outside of English is going to be Japanese that I watched. And then the most popular themes and nanogenres is the horror, the undead, monster classics, and terrifying, haunted, and supernatural horror. And then the top for nanogenres is scary, tense, cliche. And I have a bunch of other ones that are tied at 2. And then just kind of running down this one, the most watched actors was Karloff. I did 4 of his films. Scatman Crothers, I did 2. William Dafoe, 2. Bela Lugosi, 2. Kevin Van Houten-Rick at 2. Beverly Donner, 2 films. And Anne Darling as well at 2. Then for directors, I did 2 Frank Henenlotter films, 2 by J.R. Bookwalter, and 2 by Thomas Edward Seymour. And then so the highest average would have been, these are not going to necessarily be horror films, but the highest average is going to be Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Lowest average was Wolfman. Most popular was that Spider-Man film. Most obscure is Kaaterskill Falls. The newest is Round the Decay. This one actually came out on January 31st of this year. And then the oldest is going to be Bride of Frankenstein from 1935. And then the longest was Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. The shortest is Shock Cinema Volume 4. So that's all I have here then for this monthly review. So I don't think there's anything else I need to do here for this intro outside of saying thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy coming on this journey with me. And for my first mini review here is going to be Round the Decay. This is from 2025, written and directed by Adam Newman. This stars Victoria Mirror, Damien Maffei, and Sienna Hubert Ross. This is a horror film from the United States. This is currently sitting on actually not enough ratings because it's just got released as of today, which is January 31st, I should say that. But this is sitting over on Letterboxd at about a 3 to a 3.5 star movie over there. Their synopsis being, a young woman returns to the site of her broken engagement, Newport's Valley, a sleepy tourist town with an all-consuming secret. So this one I got the chance to see thanks to Alex from Simply Legendary Publicity. He helped me get a copy of the screener from Dreamscape Productions. Now, I knew this was an independent horror film from 2025 that made it enough for me to check out to help fill in, my end of year list. It's like to have some independent titles, not just everything you see in the theater, or like even if these come to the theater, they're not necessarily widely as seen as some other things. So other than that, I came in knowing just as little as possible. So I want to start is something that I appreciated quite a bit here, and this is that we have an entity called the Rexel. So I did a Google search to see if this was something in folklore. Nothing came up, except for the video game series Final Fantasy. So I'd almost be curious to see if the writer here is a fan of that, who's also the director, I should say. And then in this, the Rexel is being portrayed by Rachel Pizzolato. So the little bit that I could see from reading about this from the games, that it's an evil entity that is done through the mingling of souls. That's something that fit what I saw in this movie, and I also thought it borrowed well, or it also borrows a little bit here from the Wendigo mythology. Regardless, it's an interesting monster to use. Now that I have that, the next thing I want to kind of go into is the location, which is also another positive. I love that we're in this like small tourist town, I believe in like New Hampshire. It's the off season, so we see that the established businesses are doing just fine, because I'm assuming during the tourist season they've, kind of almost like Jaws. So we have this inn that has a new owner in Bart Blakewell, portrayed by Carrie Height. Now he's struggling. He can't afford to pay one of his employees here of Rosalind Roz Jackson, portrayed by Hubert Ross. And she ends up coming into work when she shouldn't have, and there was some miscommunication there. Now, he does also have another employee here, a Felicity, who is portrayed by Kate Keto. Now, I'm not fully aware or sure why this is the only business that is struggling, but my guess is that it allows Bart to not know Kenzie, who is our main character, and she is being portrayed by Mirror. And it also gives us some new faces in the town. This just being out of the way and the isolation that comes with it worked for me. So the last parts of the story are something else that I want to kind of tread lightly, as I don't want to spoil anything. The first would be, I didn't necessarily pick up on why we got this interesting cold open where we're seeing Waylon Newport, portrayed by Roger Clark. They are hunting down this Native American woman who has escaped from them. And then it all kind of makes sense as we kind of get introduced to this creature that stalks the town. It also took me a little bit longer to realize that we have in this one here of Greg Newport, who is portrayed by Jamie Dufault. It took me just a little bit to realize that he's a descendant of Waylon, and then he's a legacy in this town. I'm not sure if he's the mayor or if the town even has leadership that is voted like that, but he's kind of recognized as the leader. Despite how welcoming he is of Bart, it made me not trust him after making that connection. So there's another one here, this character of Monroe, portrayed by Maffei. Now we get an interesting meeting with him at the inn's bar with Kenzie, and I kind of like him as this witch hunter being called in. We don't necessarily know by who until the end of the second act. He's mysterious, which fits the role. Both of these elements here help deepen the story, though, for sure. Let's then go over to the acting performances. Mira is good as our lead. She is troubled, and it takes time to develop that. And then she also, what helps build her character, which this is all kind of working in her favor. Maffei has enough swagger about him to be this mysterious monster hunter. What I like, though, is he's not an expert. He puts his life on the line to defeat different things, and he doesn't necessarily know how to do it, so he kind of learns on the fly. And I wouldn't hate to see him come back in more stories, to be honest. I'd also say that Hubert Ross, Height, and then we also have a character who gets kind of pulled into everything here of Aiden Kazarian, portrayed by Alexis Sofoyan. I thought they were all kind of good there as outsiders. There's a lot of characters that are here for cannon fodder. I did appreciate that. I also thought that Dufault, and then in the movie, there's Teresa Newport, who's his wife, portrayed by Melody Kay, and the rest of the townspeople. They distrust outsiders for a good reason, and it feels like a tight-knit community. I'd also say that Pizzolato worked as this person inside of the creature makeup. I would never have guessed how she looked. How she moves in this entity helps bring it to life. All the stuff that'd be filmmaking. This doesn't have the biggest budget, but it also does some good things to hide it. I'd also say that I like the setting again. The cinematography and framing helped to bring that to life. This also helps with the effects. They mostly went practical from what I could tell. The look of the monster was good. The blood and gore that we got as well. They did limit, which is fine, but we do get some closer shots, which were no issues there. There is a little bit of CGI used here. It doesn't look great, but it looks like it was just used for mostly fire. That can be difficult, unfortunately, but other than that, the sound design, it was solid, and the soundtrack that was synced that I saw worked. So in conclusion, this is a solid low-budget creature feature. I do like the setup to have this monster, this town, and something that's not quite right here. The acting isn't great, but it makes for distinct enough characters, which is all you really kind of need in this, because it's almost like a slasher film and just how everybody's getting picked off. This was made well enough with the setting, cinematography, framing, and effects leading the way there. If I have a gripe, this range is a bit too long. Trimming this to about 90 minutes would help. How it is, though, I enjoyed my time, and I'd recommend this if you're interested in these type of movies. So my rating here for Round the Decay is going to be a 6.5 out of 10. Then I have another screener I got to check out of Drained. This one is from 2024. It was directed by Peter Stialanio, I think that might be how you say that, and Sean Cronin. Now, Peter also wrote this, and then this stars Rudaha Eldington. If I mispronounce any of these names, I do apologize. Madeline Belleroux Ion and Craig Conway. So this one is a horror film that is from the United Kingdom, currently sitting on a 7.6 on IMDb and a, not enough ratings on Letterboxd, but I would say between like a 3 to a 3.5 star movie over there, with our synopsis here being: unemployed artist Thomas is captivated by alluring Rhea, who conceals her nature. Their intense affair takes a sinister turn as he becomes gravely ill. Should say Thomas is portrayed by Aldington and then Rhea by Ion. So this was another one I got a chance to see thanks to Kim from Dominion 3. Level 33 Entertainment is putting this out, and I tend to at least enjoy most things from them. I'll be honest, I was leery when I saw this was a horror romance film. I had an idea of what the creature would be from the title and just kind of glancing at the poster. I did come in this one blind, aside from the information that I have shared here, and where I want to start is something that made me leery again, being a horror romance. It's definitely in that order, though. This isn't a romance in the traditional sense, and I appreciated that. We have a guy who finds a woman at a bar attractive. He shoots the shot. She leaves with him. What is different here is that she finds him an easy target, using her sexuality as a weapon. He was an easy meal. I'll bring up here at the end of my recap, and the title was a good pun here, is that I actually think the tagline might be something along those lines as well. I am trying to see if I can figure it. Oh, that she'll bleed you dry. So this is definitely playing on the thing that not only is Rhea draining Thomas of blood, but she's also physically draining. He's wasting away. That's a good touch. Now, with that out of the way, I do want to shift over to the monster itself. Vampires are creatures that are oversaturated in the market, and I'm giving this information because you learn this within the first, 2 minutes of this movie. It has been used since the beginning of the film, being vampires, and you kind of have to do something different because of it. Since the 1990s, we have seen the idea of vampirism as an allegory for drugs. It feels good in the beginning and it takes over your life, cursing it. We get that here. What is different, though, is there's another layer. Thomas is infatuated with Rhea. He enjoys her feeding on him, but it's more that it is her doing it. When things turn bad, his withdrawals seem to be that they're no longer together. This was something I could connect with. I also like using the idea of, with this as like a vampire, kind of blending these things. So there's even more layers to this as well. I'll go over to the acting performances first. Aldington does a solid job as this artist who is coasting through life. We get something a little bit later in the movie that his father passed away, so he came home to take care of his mother because he did have a job before that. And it's from that point on that she's taking care of him, so they're almost codependent on each other where she's lonely, so she needs him, but he also is taking advantage of the fact that she's taking care of him on top of that. So this causes Thomas to butt heads when she ends up being interested in this character of John, who is he's a maintenance guy, or no, he's an exterminator who comes over to help with the mother and everything like that. I like that he's challenging Thomas because because he needs it. Now, the decision for the mother to allow John to move in is paralleled then with Thomas and Rhea when they move in together. This strains all the relationships involved. Conway is good as this outsider who upsets Thomas but makes the mother happy. I also like Angela Dixon here as the mother because she's torn on what to do as well. Ion also works here as she has this accent and these darkly good looks. She's alluring, so I can see how she entices Thomas. Aldington and Ion are good with these two, pushing them to where everything kind of ends up. I'll also credit here as I'm running through the rest of the credits would be Andrew Lyle Pinnock is Dano. He's Thomas's friend who works at the bar. He also helps him get a job when he needs one. There's also two police inspectors later in this one of Linda Rathbarn, portrayed by Natasha Patel, and her partner is Edward Finch by Andrew Lee Potts. They complicate Thomas's life. This also pushes the story to a resolution, which I dug where it goes. Also thought that it'd be filmmaking. I thought that the cinematography and framing were good. We are capturing that this is taking place in a blue-collar neighborhood. Thomas has things good, and then he ventures into the dark side. They're able to capture that. The blood we get looks solid. I do like the vampire effects. They seem to mostly be done practical. My only issue here is when you use kind of computer stuff, they don't necessarily look great. They also don't ruin this, but there's no other way you could kind of do it, in my opinion. There's just a few things that take me out here and there, and it's mostly when it comes to them flying. I do also think this runs a little bit too long. It meanders a bit near the end, and I think trimming could help. Other than that, the soundtrack fit for what was needed. So in conclusion, I'm glad I took the chance on this one. We get conventions here that we've seen before. I like doing something slightly different with vampire lore, seeing how somebody can become infatuated with the dangers that come with that. Now, the acting was solid across the board. They bring their characters to life. This was made well enough. The cinematography, framing, practical effects leading the way there. My biggest issues with the CGI, and it runs just a bit too long. This is an independent film that I'd recommend to horror fans for the 2025 list. I think this might be a high-end contender on the back end of lists. Like, that's where I think it potentially could kind of come. I don't think it's going to be, topping anybody's list, unfortunately. So my rating here for Drained is going to be a 7 out of 10. Now, this should be hitting VOD already from looking at the dates of release. Kind of the same thing that would be there for Round the Decay is, so keep an eye out wherever you watch VOD films. And then I also gave a watch for my Voyage Through the Fives here, The Invisible Ray from 1935. This is directed by Lambert Hillier, or maybe Lambert Hillier. Now, this is written by John Colton, but we also have the original story written by Howard Higgin, Douglas Hodges, and then the French adaptation was uncredited work by Gene Rosenberg. This stars Boris Karloff, Bela Lugosi, and Francis Drake. This is a horror sci-fi thriller film that's from the United States, currently sitting on a 6.5 on IMDb, and a 3.1 on Letterboxd for a synopsis. A scientist becomes murderous after discovering and being exposed to the radiation of a powerful new element called Radium X. So this is another one that I saw years ago, the double DVD that featured this and another Karloff film. I remembered that I'd seen this, and I knew that I had from the title, and I knew there were some science fiction elements. Outside of that, it was kind of blurry. What made me excited to revisit this was, being a more seasoned cinephile, so this is another film featuring Karloff and Lugosi that I get to, make sure that I have a good review on the books for it. So, where I'm going to start is that it's kind of interesting that this is another lesser talked about Universal film from their classic run. Now, this features the two legends, of course, of Karloff and Lugosi, and this would be a year after The Black Cat. Something else was that this is blurring the lines of our villain. He is a shade of gray, and there's quite a bit that goes into that as well. So now that I set that up, let me explain what I mean here. So we have Dr. Janos Rook, I think that's how you might say his name. Now, he is portrayed by Karloff, and he isn't a bad guy. He isn't accepted into the science community, so it makes him defensive. His mother sees it, and she doesn't want the people come into their manor to witness this experiment, and she is portrayed by Violet Kemble Cooper. And she brings up that he isn't very sociable. I like that we get a bit of pride from him when Felix and Francis praise his experiment as a success. Now, it's Dr. Felix Benet, portrayed by Lugosi, and then the other one is Sir Francis Stevens, portrayed by Walter Kingsford. So there is even more to this, that they invite him on their expedition to Africa, because what he witnessed is that his experiment is that he believes that from the Andromeda Galaxy, he's been able to capture some rays from that galaxy, and then he claims that there are images that are imprinted on it, and he actually shows them that there was a meteor that struck in Africa, and he believes that it might have brought a material that is not normally found on Earth. So what ends up happening here is he wants to go with them to Africa to see if he can find it, and it's during this trip that he disappears for a long stretch. He interprets from them that they were trying to steal his glory when he gets back to civilization with them, and then he also is curious and believes that Ronald Drake, who is the son to Francis, is trying to steal away his fiance, or his wife, actually. Now, Ronald is portrayed by Frank Lawton, and then Diana is portrayed by Drake, and that is Janos's wife. Now, due to him being being socially aware, his defensiveness is causing him to not necessarily see the truth. Now, when faced with radiation poisoning, that makes everything worse. So in shifting from that idea, this becomes like almost an early slasher film. Janos is descending into madness when they're all back in Europe, and he sees these statues. He correlates the number of them with the people that were on the expedition. Now, he comes up with a plan to kill everybody. I like that he becomes almost a supervillain of sorts, using his affliction as a weapon, because what ends up happening is Felix actually came up with a serum that allows his radiation poisoning to be kept in check so it doesn't kill him. But when he's not on this, anything he touches dies. So that's what he's using here as a way to kill people. And this also allows Felix and the police to realize who the killer is. It's a bit obvious, but due to when this came out, I am forgiving. Thought it was created for the era that it was made. So that should be enough for the story, so let's move over to discuss the acting performances. The best here would be our lead of Karloff. I do find it interesting that he's our lead and he becomes a villain. He does a solid job of showing what that means as well, but with the power he gets and the madness that comes from it, it makes him a great character, and that worked for me. It's interesting that they're making Lugosi a good guy here once again. Now, when we meet him, it's implied that he's a jerk. What is good, though, is that he congratulates his rival and does everything he can to include him, so I like that character arc. Then we also have Lawton here as fine to complicate things. Drake is solid as well in that department. She does truly love Janos, but he pushes her away. Then we also here have Cooper as the mother here to the Janos character, and then there's also another character I want to include of Balua Bondi, who is the wife to Francis and the mother to Ronald. I thought she was solid here, and they kind of pushed all the characters where they ends up. Kingsford and the rest do round this out for what was needed as well. All that's left then is filmmaking. The cinematography and framing were good. They captured this isolated manor for the Rook family, then making it seem like our characters are in Africa and then returning to civilization. That was all good. We don't get much in the way of effects. What they do, I mean, the best part here I thought was kind of funny is he actually harnesses this material and uses it as a ray to destroy a boulder, showing what it does to people when they're like helping them as it cures things and making Janos glow. They don't necessarily look great, but there's some charm there, so I don't have necessarily any issues. Other than that, the soundtrack was fine without necessarily standing out. So there isn't anything more to go into here, so I'll say in conclusion, I'm glad that I revisited this one. I didn't remember the story that we got developed here, but we are getting interesting sci-fi concept that drives our main character into madness. This almost like an early slasher film with how it goes with eliminating them. Now, the acting performances are good. Karloff is solid along with Lugosi. Everyone has their part in pushing Janos to where he ends up. Thought this was made well enough. The cinematography and framing were solid. Even though the effects are limited for the era, there's still some charm there. I'd recommend this if you want to see the filmography of these two legends, or if you're a fan of this era of the Universal films. So my rating here for The Invisible Ray, though, is going to be a 7.5 out of 10. Then my last feature here is not going to necessarily be a horror movie, but it definitely was a little bit darker and is a bit of a thriller here, and that's going to be Kaaterskill Falls from 2001. This is directed between Josh Apter and Peter Olson. Now, Apter also co-wrote this with Hilary Howard and Anthony Leslie. There's another thing here. I just want to make sure that I'm not leaving anybody out. And it also looks like Olsen and Riggs was also involved, and that would be Mitchell Riggs as Howard, and Riggs star in this with Anthony Leslie. So pretty much everybody who is a writer here also was in this movie. But this is from the United States. Currently sitting on a 4.6 on IMDb and a not enough ratings on Letterboxd, but I'd say about a 2 to a 2.5 over there where the synopsis is. A romantic road trip to the Catskills for some much-needed time alone turns bumpy for Wren, who's portrayed by Howard, and Mitchell by Riggs, in this indie film directed by Apter and Olsen. After picking up a hitchhiker, Lyle, portrayed by Leslie, their dream vacation becomes a nightmare, especially when it appears their cabin hours after they drop him off at the side of the road. At Kaaterskill Falls, the mounting tension takes a toll. So this I picked up on DVD years ago. The reason was that I saw this was a remake of Knife in the Water. So I saw that one because it was an early Roman Polanski film, and as I'm a fan of his works, not necessarily him, I had an interesting kink here where if I knew a movie had a remake or a reimagining, I'd seek out all the versions. So it's been years since I've seen that original one, so outside of remembering the basic premise, I didn't know if anything, would make it into this one here. So what we have here, like I said, is that couple coming up here should say that Mitchell works in technology where he does, and then she does photography on the side. Now, they're hoping to get pregnant during this trip, so they end up picking up this hitchhiker of Lyle. They drop him off at a motel and then go about their trip, but when they come into town for supplies, he knocks on their window of the car, and they offer to take him to the place where they rented their cabin to see if they have a free room. When there's nobody in the office, Lyle is invited over for dinner and to hang out, and things get tense the longer this trio's together. So then where I'm going to go from there is that we have some interesting things with the filmmaking, which actually kind of impressed me. There's some great shots with angles or just how they're crafted. I also like this editing at times where we see a group hanging out, but no one's lips are moving, but you can still hear the dialogue, but we see that they're overlaying shots. I thought this helped to kind of break things up that we're seeing. So since it's just a 3-person cast, doing something different helps. So we get some great shots of nature as well. Now, something that doesn't work is building tension. The problem here is that I don't like any of these characters. They don't necessarily act human, so I'll say part of this is probably being independent as this is, that the acting isn't great, and then the writing isn't helping either. But we have Mitchell here as he's trying to do some work, and we see he's misogynistic toward Wren by telling her not to drink or smoke. Clearly does not understand how the human body works, since she isn't pregnant yet, and so it's not going to affect their unborn child. And unless she's doing like hard drugs. I just don't like how he's drinking and smoking and having fun, but he scolds her for doing it. Then Wren says some things that are uncomfortable and a bit too forward towards Lyle. He does this as well, which upsets our couple in return. But my problem here is that these people just met. So I don't believe that they would act this way. I wasn't even sure if they were, I don't even know if they would be in this situation. Now, Wren does tell a story about when she was younger, and that did make more sense as the situation developed. With how awkward things get, it's uncomfortable, but not necessarily in the best way possible. It doesn't necessarily work either. So I'm not sure if there's anything more I need to say here, so I'm not going to knock the actors down more than I already have. They fit their characters, I'll say that, but this one doesn't go in the direction that I was fully expecting. I still thought it was fine. Overall, not a great movie, and I can only recommend this if you like lower budget cinema like this. I would still say go see Knife in the Water, since that's a superior film in every way. So my rating here for Kaaterskill Falls is going to be a 4.5 out of 10. Then I have a documentary here for you of VHS Massacre. This is from 2016. This is directed between Kenneth Powell and Thomas Edward Seymour, and Seymour also wrote this. Now this features the likes of Mike Anarosky, Alan Baugh, as well as Troy Biernair. I'll get into more there as well, but this is a comedy, documentary, history, horror, sci-fi film that is from the United States. It is currently sitting on a 5.7 on IMDb and a 2.7 on Letterboxd, with a synopsis being: this lively documentary explores the rise and fall of physical media from the origin of film all the way through the video store era into digital media, focusing on B-movie and cult films with icons like Joe Bob Briggs from Monster Vision, Lloyd Kaufman, Toxic Avenger, Greg Sestero from The Room, Debbie Rochon from Return to Nukem High, Deborah Reed from Troll 2, Mark Frazier from Samurai Cop, James Wynn from Birdemic, and many others. So this is a documentary that I threw on while I was at work late in the day. I treat these like podcasts where I'll listen to them, and if something looks interesting, I'll kind of look down. I just don't need to give it my full attention. I'll start here by also saying I watched the sequel to this, VHS Massacre 2, first. Didn't realize that that was a second part to this one, and I will end up doing that one here as a documentary on this as a mini review at some point. But this is a doc that has a tagline of cult films and the decline of physical media. This came out in 2016, so it's more about the state at that time. Things have changed a bit, and the second part does explore more with the streaming, since that has become bigger. This is given the history of VHS and its decline into DVD and then Blu-ray. What makes this interesting is hearing like John Bloom, aka Joe Bob Briggs, who is just a legend. His wealth of knowledge is great, and I could listen to him talk all day. He's not the only one, though. I do find it interesting to hear from Lloyd Kaufman and some of these other indie filmmakers as well. Now, something that works for me is seeing the team behind this go out and search places for VHS tapes. Now, I'm a collector on a much smaller scale, but I listen to podcasts where these people used to do this. I find it interesting. It was fun to see what they could find. There's almost a meta aspect here, since this culminates in them watching tapes they found and calling that event VHS Massacre. So this isn't working with the biggest budget, and it's not the most professional. I did like hearing from people who are similar to me, who grew up in the video store days. There's nostalgia there from, missing all of that type of experience of, walking around a video store and picking things out. It's interesting to watch this now with streaming and being in almost a golden age of collecting as well. I did like this team editing footage from things that they're talking about. This adds a good touch there. I enjoyed my time. I don't feel like I wasted anything here. Plus, I was entertained. In what we're doing here, sounds interesting. I'd recommend giving this one a watch for sure. So my rating here for VHS Massacre is going to be a 6.5 out of 10. Then I have a couple episodes here of American Horror Story for you, and the first one is going to be X. So this one is directed by Matt Spicer and then written by Manny Cotto, and it stars Mia Isaac, Dylan Burnside, and Jennifer Farron. And this is: a dedicated nurse searches for answers when a woman is found filthy in a hospital gown with an undiagnosable illness and an unreadable ID tag as well. So this one here, black and white. We start this off in a booth, and that person out there is actually going to be Malcolm, portrayed by Burnside. So this is kind of creepy here, is that we have this woman who has her face is stuck open and just kind of staring, and then she disappears into the dark. So then we have a mother here with her son who is dying of cancer, and Claire Michaels is a nurse, portrayed by Isaac. So she ends up learning that there's nothing that she thought that they could do at first for this boy, but then a doctor here who is portrayed by the great Henry Winkler of Dr. Eric Nordstrom comes and says that there's a Spring Hill program. So this creepy lady keeps coming back, and she is Alice Young, portrayed by Amy Ruggiero. And it's kind of interesting how there's like a secret plot going on here. People start getting attacked, and we see that this hospital is doing things to cover all this stuff up. I rather enjoyed this one, as there's some things here that I kind of predicted was going to end up happening that did, but I still enjoyed my time here, and I gave X a 7 out of 10 here for this episode, on the higher end there. And then the other one I got to watch is Leprechaun. This one is directed by Alexis Martin Woodall. It was written by Joe Bacon. And then we have this starring Jessica Barden, Henry Eikenberry, and Hudson Oz. And this one is: in order to make ends meet, a group of unemployed laborers break into a local bank. What begins as a run-of-the-mill heist develops into anything but. So this one here, we start in I don't know how deep, but we're in the past, and we have this Irish guy who he is afraid somebody's going to take his gold, and then he sees a glowing well, falls into it. We come to modern day in a city, and that well is just outside of a bank. So we have this character of Haley Daughtry, who is portrayed by Barden. Now she works here, and she is, I believe, married to Colin, who's portrayed by Eikenberry. So he's struggling financially. She's pregnant. And then he ends up going to meet his buddy here of Liam, portrayed by Hudson Butts in Oz, and it's here that he starts talking about he's got a criminal mentality, and they have a group of friends here, and they're going to rob the local bank. So an old guy at the bar tells them to watch out for leprechauns, and they seem to be vampire-like. So they end up going about how they're going to do this one, and when they're inside and actually start going about this heist, they find out that things are much more difficult than they actually realize as the vault is open and there's stairs going into the basement. So there's some things here that I'm not going to spoil. We also have June Squibb is in this one as the grandmother. This one I thought was kind of cool. There were some things I started to predict, and then there was a little bit things here and there that I necessarily didn't, so I did appreciate that. This one, once again, I rather enjoyed here as a 6 out of 10. So that's all I have here then for mini reviews. Let me go ahead and get you over the trailer of my first featured review.
今回初めての主演映画ということですが、
リリコが表紙飾ると出る雑誌もバカ売れ。
誰もが認めるカリスマリリコさんです。
興味深い顔が崩れている。
今女子がなりたい顔ナンバー1ですよ。
整形の後遺症なんだ。あの子はさ、元のまんまのまま目ん玉と耳と爪とあそこぐらいのもんでさ、あとは全部作り物なんだ。私たちは革命を起こしているのです。
まさにヘルタースケルター、つまりしっちゃかめっちゃか。
はじめまして。
期待の新人です。
二人も死んだ。ゾッとするね。
で、舐めてくれない。私これからあんたの彼とすっごいやらしいことすんのよ。舐めたぐらいで調子に乗ってんじゃねえよ。あんたたちに分かってたまるか。やれば？人生なんて自分で決めるのよ。もうこんな仕事やりたくないよ。どうして神様は私たちにまず若さと美しさを与え、そして奪うんでしょう。綺麗じゃなくなったらきっとみんな私から離れてくる。
ヘルタースケルター。
見たいものを見せてあげる。
And for my first featured review here is going to be Helter, Skelter. It goes by the original title of Hiruta Sakuruta, and this is from 2012. It is directed by Mika Ninagawa. It was written by Arisa Kaneko. And I should also say here that this is from the manga that is written by Kyoko Akuzaki. I think it might be how you might pronounce that. And any mispronunciations that I do have here, I do apologize to anybody who is, involved or affected there. But this stars Erika Sajajiri, Nao Omori, and Shinbu Terajima, and also the likes of Go Ananu, Kiko Mitsuhara, Hiro Fuma Arai, Ana Suzuki, Shishimu Terajima, Sho Aikawa, Karo Momo, Maroko Sumiyoshi, Naomi Konoko, Miyuko Harada, Lily Frankie, Amuko Hara, Shohei Hino, O Kayabashi, and Fumio Kohinata. And this is a crime drama horror film, but it's also body horror, psychological drama, and horror there. Psychological horror, that was what I mean in there. This is from Japan. It is currently sitting on a 6.4 on IMDb and a 3.8 on Letterboxd, with our synopsis being: top star Liliko undergoes multiple cosmetic surgeries on her entire body. Things start to fall apart as the side effects emerge. So I'll say here that main character of Liliko is portrayed by Sawajiri. So this is one that went on a list of ones to see years ago. I originally learned about it due to my podcast here. So for February, I like to feature 2 horror movies that were directed by women. So this was at the top of that list according to Letterboxd, and we'll see what it is. There's a list on Letterboxd of the top films directed by women. This one actually doubles as a horror film, so I really wanted to check this one out. And it's been a while since I've been trying to find a copy, and I finally have this year thanks to archive.org. So then, before I jump into the movie itself, let's do some feature notes. I'll start with the director here, Nina Gawa. She has helmed 6 features, first that I've seen, first she's done in horror. Then the writer of Kaneko has 29 credits, much like the director, first that I've seen of hers, only thing she's done in genre. Then the writer of the source material is Okazaki. Now, 4 things that they've written have been adapted onto the screen. This is the only thing that's been in horror, the only thing I've seen. Then to our cast, our star here of Sawajira. This is the first of her 39 movies that I've seen. She's had 3 things in horror. The other ones being Ghost Train from 2006 and Ashura from 2005. These are both, I believe, Japanese. Now, her co-star of Omori has been in 128 features and 2 shorts. I've seen him in 3 things. Not horror, I've seen Demon Lover. I think that one might be a little bit adjacent, or at least some like a psychological thing there. But in horror, he has 16. I've seen 2 with this and Ichi the Killer. Top 3 that I haven't, though, are As the Gods Will, Rampo Noir, and Parasite Part 1. Then the last I'll look at here is going to be Terajima. She has been in 71 films, first that I've seen, and the first that she's also done in horror. All right, then let's jump into this movie here, and we'll start off with a group of girls. I'm not sure if they're supposed to be high school or college age, but we will come back to them throughout this story. They're talking about Liliko and how she's the hot new thing. We first see her in medical wraps, and then they're doing like a surgery, and then we actually see these wraps as they're being removed. Now, we have a prosecutor named Asada, who we also meet here, who is portrayed by Amori. Now, he makes a comment about her face doesn't match up with her bone structure or something along these lines, so he knows there's something off. It's from here that we learn more about Liliko, though, and we get an idea of her daily life. She's a hot new model, as I've said. She's making the transition to her first acting job. Then the paper comes out after a press conference where she's sharing a page with another actress. Now, her manager, who she calls Mom, is Hiroko Tada, portrayed by Momi. I should also say that issue with that paper is that she's mad that she's sharing that, so she does bring this to her, like her agent. So then we also have an assistant here to Liliko of Michiko Hada, who is portrayed by Terajima. Now, Liliko is hard on her, but Hada enjoys her job. And she is also dating Shin Akimura, who is portrayed by Anao. And I should say that is Hada is dating him. Now, things are going great for Liliko, as she just got engaged to her boyfriend. All good things come to an end, though. She first starts to see these spots on her body. This is due to the treatments that she's getting and the surgery she's receiving from this clinic. She has to continue to do more to stay perfect, which I believe now includes like injections of some sort of serum. Doesn't know there's a new model who is rivaling her, even taking jobs from her, who is Kozui Ashikawa, portrayed by Mitsuhara. Now, it is revealed as well that Liliko's fiancé is engaged to marry the daughter of a politician. Now, prosecutor Asada approaches Liliko, wanting her to testify against the clinic that helped to obtain these looks that she has. So from all this, Liliko spirals out of control, lashing out at those around her in retaliation. The length she'll go to get what she wants and to stay on top, and then the problem ends up becoming, how long can this last before everything finally just falls apart? So that's really my recap and introduction of the characters. Where I want to start is that this is a simple story. It's much more of a character study, though, of Liliko, as we watch everything that goes into her persona, driving her to madness. It's almost easier for her to obtain being the top model, but maintaining it's another thing. Something else I'll come back to are the visuals that bring this all to life. So let me delve a little bit more here into this main character, as I've been saying. She busts onto the scene and she's everywhere. She's on the cover of all these magazine commercials and now branching into acting. What the public doesn't know is everything that she went through to obtain her level of perfection. It involved surgery and injections of a serum that might not be ethically made. She has natural talent, but she hasn't always been this beautiful. We are seeing this unreal standard that she tries to maintain. There's even some greed here as she tries to keep everything that she feels is hers. I'll go ahead and credit Sajawa here. She never comes across as likable, as she's the villain. This performance, though, is perfect for this role. Let me then shift gears here to discuss the social commentary. I've already brought up the standard that she's holding herself to. This is definitely a commentary on the modeling industry, how it's toxic and the treatment of women. It's also toxic on how they treat each other, with Liliko towards like Hada. You could even look at this with Mom back to Liliko. It is curious that she calls her manager this, as it feels like a representation of a mother who pushes their child too far to live up to these expectations. I get the idea of not being good enough. You could also point to how the industry gives people their 15 minutes of fame before it chews them up and spits them out. Spits them out broken, metaphorically speaking. I did appreciate that. So let's discuss the best part here, and this is with filmmaking. Visually, this movie is absolutely stunning. The color palette is rich and a feast for the eyes. There are great montage sequences to help tell the story and get you up to speed with things, like seeing her as she, kind of rises to the top, as well as what goes into her becoming perfect. But then we also see her descend into madness through these as well. Thought the cinematography and framing were great. This makes sense since this is being pulled from that manga, as I was saying, that was done by Okazaki. I'd bet there are sequences or imagery pulled directly. There are also the effects here. I would say this is a combination of practically done, and I know there's a little bit of CGI. It is still limited for the most part, though, as it's more of a character study. I don't have any issues here, though, especially since the CGI does seem to be when Liliko is hallucinating, so things that she's seeing aren't always real. Then finally discuss the soundtrack. This is a combination of classical music and songs that are fitting the atmosphere. I'll be honest here. It made me think of Clockwork Orange here, especially because they do use some Beethoven as well. It fit the tone that was needed here for sure. My only gripe is that this runs too long. It gets repetitive. I do think they could trim about 15 to 30 minutes, kind of convey the same exact ideas that we have here without having it kind of be bogged down. Let's then go ahead and just finish out with the rest of the acting performances. I've already said how good Sawajiro was. I do like Omori and the other police officers. They run concurrently with her story. It isn't until they decide to go after the clinic that prosecutor Asada actually approaches her, which adds to her stress. Terajima and Anau are good as they get tangled up with Liliko. She bullies them, forces them to do things they don't necessarily want to in order to gain control back over her life. That adds to the tension. Other than that, I would say that Mitsuhara, Momo, and the rest of the cast kind of push Liliko to where she ends up. Now, there's a little bit of trivia here that I was going to do on the IMDb page, and this is actually the favorite movie of Marcia Haze. And then this was based on Ozaki's manga Helter Skelter, which was published by Shiodensha in 2003. This was the 2004 grand winner of the Tezuka Osamu Cultural Prize. Actress Serizawa makes her return to the big screen after a 5-year hiatus, which is kind of interesting there. It's almost like she is this character as she kind of comes back to this outside world of doing things. Oh man, I'm just trying to connect this stuff. But in conclusion, biggest compliment I can give to this film is it's a feast for the eyes. Visually, this is stunning. I think that it's telling an interesting story about Liliko and the dangers of the fashion industry. It is a character study of her while she's also telling the horror story for women. The performance from Sawajira is great. The rest of the cast push her to where she ends up. This is well made, with the biggest gripe being that it runs just a bit too long. Not one that I can recommend to everybody, but if what I said interests you, I would say give this one a watch. So my rating here for Helter Skelter is going to be, this is from 2012, an 8 out of 10. I'm not going to do a spoiler section. I don't necessarily think there's anything deeper that I need to kind of go into outside of what I've done here, so let me go ahead and get you over to the trailer of my second featured review.
What's it like?
What's what like?
I never had anybody die.
Scary. And it goes on.
What do you mean?
Like, the world cracks apart. And you fall into this hole. And the sides are mud, and you can't get out. You wonder where they are. And you wonder what it would be like if you were there too.
And my second featured review here is going to be Presence. This is from technically 2024, but I was doing festival stuff last year, and I got its wide release here this year. So this is directed by Steven Soderbergh. This is written by David Kopp. Now, this stars Lucy Liu, Chris Sullivan, and Kelina Liang. I think that's how you might say that name. And then this also features the likes of Eddie Madej, Wes Mulholland, Julia Fox, Benny Eldridge, Daniel Danielson, Jared Wiseman, Robert M. Jimenez, Lucas Papadopoulos, and Natalie Loems Torres. So then this is a psychological drama, thriller, horror film that is from the United States. Currently sitting on a 6.7 on IMDb and a 3.1 on Letterboxd with a synopsis being, a family becomes convinced they are not alone after moving into their new home in the suburbs. So it's one that I knew was getting some buzz. The trailer caught my attention when it was being shown at the Gateway Film Center, so I added it to my list of ones to see for 2025. Something interesting is that most buzz from people that I interact with in the community, this was positive. Something also interesting was the debate whether this was a horror film, that I actually saw this pop up right there before I saw it, like that day earlier. I caught this one on the opening Sunday of it coming out as well. So let's do some feature notes before I jump into the movie itself and start with our director here of Soderbergh. He has directed 45 films and 6 shorts. I've seen 10. Not horror, I've seen the Ocean's 11 movies through 13, Aaron Brockovich and Side Effects. He has 2 in horror. I've seen both with this and Unsane. I also put Contagion as horror adjacent, so I've also seen that one as well. Now, this was written by Cup, who has written 36 features, and many are heavy hitters. I've seen 17 of his credits. Not horror, he did Sam Raimi's Spider-Man. Also did Carlito's Way and Premium Rush. In horror, he officially has 7. I've seen 3. I've seen the Mummy remake with Tom Cruise, which isn't very good, but I've also seen Stir of Echoes, which I'm a big fan of. I have not seen Death Becomes Her, You Should Have Left, Dark Angel from 1990, or Apartment Zero. Now, he also did Secret Window, the Jurassic Park movies, Panic Room, and War of the Worlds from 2005, which some of those are more adjacent than others, but I think they're very close to the genre. Let's move over to the cast. First will be Lou. She has been in 69 movies. Nice. And 6 shorts. I've seen 9. Not horror, she was in Kill Bill Volume 1 and 2, Jerry Maguire and Charlie's Angels, that I've seen. Has 2 in horror with this, and Rise Blood Hunter, which I've not seen that other one. Then her co-star of Sullivan. He has 19 features and 3 shorts. I've seen him in 3 works. Not horror as Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. In genre, he has 5. I've seen him in this and I Trapped the Devil. I have not seen Morgan, Broadcast Signal Intrusion, or Agnes. Now, Broadcast Signal Intrusion is one that I missed it when it first came out, but it's definitely one of those ones that I'm intrigued by. Last will be Liang. She has 2 motion pictures. First that I've seen. First that she's done in horror. All right, then, so this movie here, we start inside of an empty house. We are seeing everything from the eyes of this presence. Now, we see Cece, portrayed by Fox, preparing to show this house to a new family. It hasn't even hit the market yet. Rebecca, who is portrayed by Lou, talks to her husband, Chris, portrayed by Sullivan, in the kitchen. She is ready to put in an offer where Chris isn't sure this is a good idea. Now, she's driving this because their son Tyler, portrayed by Madej, is a great swimmer. This puts him at a good school where he can compete at a high level. She doesn't even seem to care how her daughter Chloe, portrayed by Liang, might be affected. Regardless of how Chris feels, they put in an offer, which shouldn't shock anybody here. It is from there that we jump into different times as his family settles in and goes about their lives. Chris is worried about Chloe, where Rebecca thinks she just needs time. Chloe has had 2 different friends pass away abruptly. Tyler thinks it's due to them doing drugs. The siblings don't get along. Part of it is how selfish Tyler is. He's also a little bit babied because the mother does everything that she can to provide for him, and she's constantly doting on him as well. Now, Chloe feels his presence, but no one will listen to her. That is until things happen that cannot be ignored. Tyler also befriends Ryan, who is portrayed by Mulholland, who is the most popular guy at this new school. He also has an eye on Chloe. So that's where I'll leave my recap and introduction of the characters. Where I want to start is that whether this is a horror film. Now, the argument is that the elements that you put into this genre are not exclusive to it. You can watch an atmospheric drama film. There can be a sense of foreboding in a thriller as events go to the inevitable. You can also even have ghosts or a haunted house in a gothic film. There's even the argument here that the scariest scene is right near the end. Despite everything that I've said here, I still think this is in genre. I just won't argue with anybody who disagrees because it comes down to personal preference, and I'm not going to be able to sway anybody on those grounds. Now that out of the way, I do agree this is much more of a family drama though. I'm also going to incorporate filmmaking since we are seeing everything through the eyes of this entity. I love that most of the family members do not know there is a ghost staring at them. It is only Chloe, and it's not even every time. We are popping into important moments to tell the story. What I don't know is this entity here all day, every day? Or is this like this consciousness kind of comes forward when stress or something is happening? I was trying to figure out how to write that statement down there. What I'm trying to get at here is I'm assuming this entity does not experience time the same way that we do. So is it for this entity that everything is kind of happening in a very short window? For these characters, is this happening over like a month stretch? That's something I kind of just thought about. It doesn't affect the movie either way with the explanation. I do like, though, we jump into a scene, it's developing a character or characters and through what they do or say. So there's not really a lot of wasted time on screen. Now, it all culminates in this woman having second sight tells Chris regarding a window that won't open. She alerts him and that it hasn't happened yet. There's a stretch that you could almost make the argument that there is no presence. I do like that this has, that it moves items so we know that it's there. Bringing this to life was something I appreciate with the practical route that it went. It also makes us feel kind of like a fly on the wall by seeing everything through it. Now, since I've discussed how they make this, let's then go over to the acting performances, because that's where this really shines for me. I love how they bring the characters to life and how it also plays with gender norms, just not without being in your face. Lou is great as this mother who is more of the successful parent. She loves Tyler more than Chloe, but it's bordering on incestuous. What I like is that it doesn't press buttons for the sake of doing it. It's actually done in a very kind of grounded way, and the way that she's kind of doting on him is more that she expects such high things for him and can see the potential, where Chloe, she really just kind of doesn't see as much in. And I mean, I also think this is also kind of playing in a little bit here to like Asian culture, where I do know that everybody in the family is expected to succeed and they kind of put that pressure on them, where in this one, she's not necessarily doing it to Chloe. Now, this is a little bit different from your typical American family as well. I've been seeing people say that Chris has been emasculated. He doesn't mind it, though, so I don't necessarily think it's an issue. He is more of the loving parent, focusing on Chloe due to the loss that she's going through. I like the contract that we have here. Madej and Liang are good as these two kids. Him being narcissistic and her just kind of floating through life. She's trying to find herself, and that was something I appreciated, as all four were just kind of great here. Now, I did want to discuss another character who becomes more important as we go, and Ryan is somebody that Tyler thinks will help his social standing at school. It causes him to freak out when, over dinner, Chloe brings up that she thinks there is a presence in the house. What is interesting there is that the first time Ryan comes over, Tyler asks if he wants to meet her. This feels natural enough. There's this morbid curiosity there. Now, since he was friends with one of the deceased classmates, since she was friends with one of the deceased classmates, I did want to make sure that I clarified that. So she's also attractive. Mulholland is good here as seemingly like this teen who is popular but harboring his own issues. It goes dark the more we learn about him and why he wants to get to know Chloe. So the last part of the story, circling back to the presence here, is Chloe is convinced that her friend is the ghost. This doesn't get confirmed, but there is something that happens late that makes me wonder. My issue here would be, if it's her friend, why is she haunting this house? The dates don't necessarily line up, since we learn Rebecca and Chris that, it didn't happen, the event didn't happen that long ago, these two passed away, but this information isn't necessarily needed, just something that I question. So all that's left before I do a little bit of trivia is going to be that this is well made, so filmmaking. I've already said how good the cinematography was, the framing was as well, and I thought it was interesting visual storytelling. There isn't much in the way of effects, but I bet they were done practically since they are subtle. Either way, I thought those were good. Soundtrack is also solid to fit what was needed here on top of that. And then the trivia here, not very much, but the film was shot in 3 weeks, entirely in one house, without any close-ups, according to a Variety article by Stephen Roderick. The average film contains 100, if not thousands, of hard cuts. This one only has 33 of those. Though well received at Sundance, many viewers walked out due to its intensity. One person said, "I cannot take this stress so late at night." The on-screen credit font is the same as in Poltergeist 1982, so a little bit of correlation there. And then going a little bit deeper here, I'm not going to go, it's considered a spoiler, but there are fewer than 100 cuts in this whole film, assuming the black frame separating scenes each count as a cut. This is an exceptionally low number, owing to director Soderbergh's rule that individual scenes be composed of a single continuous shot. Whether a scene takes place in one room or characters are tracked moving throughout the house. This was not absolute, as a cut within some scenes occur, and there's going kind of into examples here of that, but that's kind of interesting what they were doing there. It definitely makes things a little bit more tense, because most movies we're used to them cutting away and, going to what we consider to be important next. This one lets things linger a little bit and lets things build, so I actually kind of appreciate what they did there. In conclusion, I can see this being a divisive film. I'm guessing the community is going to be split on whether this is horror or just a family drama. I can see both sides. To me, it does enough to be at least adjacent. It's got good acting to bring these characters to life. I like what they're doing with the filming techniques, especially the cinematography. Since it was made by Soderbergh, I'm not shocked that they went a little bit more like a minimalist approach. Just because I know he's somebody who does things a little bit different, and that's something that I'm always down for. Leaning just a bit more into the horror would have helped me. With what we get, this is a modern gothic film that is well made. Not one that I can recommend to everybody, but if you like this director or what I said sounds interesting, give this one a viewing. So my rating here for Presence is going to be an 8 out of 10. Not going to do a spoiler section. Don't necessarily think there's anything to do there either. So let me go ahead and get you over to one last break before I close out the show.
Hello, this is Ruin Willow with the "Oh, fuck yeah" with Rue and Willow podcast. I'm excited you're here again. Always, I'm excited you're here when I come to my podcast. We talk about sex. We talk about sexuality. We talk about better sex, erotica, all kinds of yummy stuff related to sex and sexuality. Get entertained, improve your intimacy, and get advice to harness your empowerment. You have the tools right in you. Just get the advice. Listen to my interviews on Fridays with experts, doctors, professors, personalities, people who are free and open and have great things to say. And on Tuesdays, I have erotic fiction. Find me on all the podcast apps. Come today. Don't forget to come today. Enjoy your body. Give yourself that amazing experience of orgasm where you can imagine how wonderful that will feel. All of those amazing hormones flooding your body, making you feel exhilarated, amazing, incredible, like never before. Reach for it. Take it, baby. Make yourself come today. You have an amazing day. Love ya. Oh, fuck yeah. Bye-bye.
And welcome back one last time here. And just to kind of go through my social medias and stuff, if you'd like to send me an email, you can send that at journeywithacinephile@gmail.com. You can send me any sort of feedback, or if you have any questions or anything, go ahead and shoot them there, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Or if you want to send me any screener links or anything like that, anything podcast related, you can send it via that way. If you'd like to read any of the written reviews, I'll direct you to Reviews of the Dead, and that's horrorreview.webnode.com. If you'd like to become friends with me on Facebook, I'm David Michigan Garrett Jr. On Twitter, I'm Buckeye from Mish. Letterboxd, I'm David OSU. On Instagram, I'm David OSU87. On Threads, I'm David OSU87. And then Journey with a Cinephile has its own Instagram at Journey with a Cinephile, all one word. Now, all of these ones I will be sharing like my ratings on, whatnot. I know for Letterboxd, all of the reviews are going to be for horror and non-horror alike. Instagram, I will be sharing over there is my different like posters and everything for things that I'm reviewing. My personal account, you might see some personal pictures every now and then if I can remember to take them. And then, kind of same thing for Threads. And then Journey with a Cinephile is going to be more of just kind of posting podcast-related different stuff over there. And I'll also direct you to the Nightclub Discord channel, as I have a little section over there where we have some good conversations. I post all of my reviews and any new podcast episodes or some of the things I'm watching when I actually have time to post that. So keep an eye out over there, and I'll have the link for that and everything else in the show notes there. And then I'm also going to direct you, a way that you can actually listen to the show is going to be through the Pod Nation TV. This is a streaming service and everything like that. There will be a link in the blog posts for all of my episodes, so if you'd like to listen to it that way, it's kind of a cool little thing. You can definitely do that through like Roku TV, and there's some other apps for it as well, just as another way for you to consume this podcast if you decide to. There's also a lot of other great shows that are on that network as well. And for the next episode is going to be episode 275, which is going to be a Black Appreciation episode, or the first one I'll be doing here for this year. But this one's going to also be double as a Woman Appreciation. I'll get into why. I've selected Antebellum, one that I missed a few years ago, and definitely wanted to give that one a watch. And then I'm going to try to go to the Gateway Film Center. I think I've already talked to Jamie, and we figured out when I'll go. I'm going to go see Companion. This one has Sophie Thatcher in the lead role there, so that kind of works for that. So then I'll also, my Voyage to the 5 movie, I'm going to be watching The Body Snatcher. I haven't seen this one for a good handful of years, so I just want to give that one a revisit. And then I also have some mini reviews for you. I'm not really necessarily sure what I'll see yet, or kind of see if any screeners or anything come in like that. If not, I'll just kind of work through some of my lists and everything on top of that. So I don't think there's anything else I need to go into here, so that wraps up this episode of Journey with a Cinephile, a horror movie podcast. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of horror cinema. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and follow along for more deep dives into the macabre. Until next time, keep watching horror, and remember, fear is just a frame away.
It had been a wonderful evening, and what I needed now to give it the perfect ending